In this video, we'll be discussing how polymers are being used in the medical field to advance and improve the treatment of disease. Polymer chemistry is one of the most prevalent fields of science in the modern world. If you take a look around the room you're in right now, there will be a plethora of items that were made from this science. Whether it be food storage, protective packaging, or clothes and accessories, polymers play a key role in our everyday lives. A polymer is defined as a substance which has a molecular structure built up chiefly or completely from a large number of similar units. These units are known as monomers. It's a German word but comes from the Greek word polymeris, meaning having many parts, which can be broken down into two parts, poly meaning many and meros meaning a share. So what is the structure of a polymer? For this we're going to have to explore what a monomer is. On the left we can see an image of a monomer called ethylene. By breaking its double bond and joining it with other ethylene molecules in the same broken bond state, they form together to create the polymer on the right known as polyethylene. On the polymer you can see that there are square brackets. This signifies a single monomer unit. We can display these single units in the way shown in the bottom left of the screen in what we call a repeating unit. We do this as a polymer can get very long, and thus it would be impractical to draw them out. Where the n is, we would put a number to signify how many of these repeating units are in the polymer. There are many ways we can categorize polymers, but one way to do so is by whether they're natural or synthetic. Some polymers exist naturally in the world, so we call them natural polymers. This includes DNA, proteins, and polysaccharides such as cellulose in plants. There are then synthetic ones, which we can create. There are two main mechanisms for this, known as step growth and chain growth, but others exist too. The first way we'll explore chain growth. This is where a monomer is added to the chain one by one. There are many types, such as free radical, cationic, and anionic, but all follow a similar three-step mechanism. The first step is initiation, where a reactive species forms which interacts with one of the monomers. By doing so, the end group, last attached monomer, becomes reactive. This leads into propagation, where the end group reacts with another monomer, forming a bond and lengthening the chain. This creates a new reactive end group. The last step is termination, which is where there is a deactivation of the end group, ending the chain expansion. This could be caused by two radicals colliding, loss of a proton, or in some cases there is none at all, creating what is known as a living polymer. There is then the step growth mechanism, which is where multiple chains are being formed at once. This is possible as there's multiple reactive groups, both on the chain and individual monomers. Once the chains start to form, they can then link together. Polymers can be made of multiple different monomers, making them what's known as a copolymer. By using a living polymer, you can control the order of monomers added, so that all the monomer A are next to each other, and all the monomer B are next to each other, making what is known as a block copolymer. Depending on the monomers used and the type of polymer formed, certain characteristics can be controlled. For example, if the orange monomers are hydrophobic and the yellow ones are hydrophilic, your compound will be amphipathic, meaning that they have both properties. Polymers with this property can be used to form a structure known as a micelle, which we'll look at later. But first we need to touch on what nanomedicine is. Nanomedicine is similar to other medicine, except for its scale. It's on the scale of 1 to 100 nanometers, which for comparison there are a billion nanometers in a meter. To give perspective, this is the same size as DNA or some viruses, and if you were to say the diameter of a marble was 1 nanometer, that would make the Earth's diameter a meter. So you may be wondering, why does it matter how big they are? Surely it can't have that much of an effect. For this, let's look at how conventional medicine works. A lot of medicine we use works by either targeting the central nervous system or cells and organs directly. In the central nervous system, we use drugs to stimulate or inhibit neurotransmitters, which allow us to control responses. For cells and organs, we have drugs flow through our blood via the circulatory system, where it diffuses through to the cell. Although these methods tend to work, they have their downsides. Some drugs such as opioids, which are pain relievers, such as morphine, have addictive traits, and it's believed that 500,000 people die per year due to opioid overdose. The medicine will also not be fully effective due to some of it being lost in diffusion while travelling through the body, and this can cause side effects such as nausea due to them interacting with other parts of the body. For example, when treating cancer we use chemotherapy, which works, but it also affects the healthy cells, which can make you ill. But nanomedicine works slightly different. Due to its small size and special structure, we can make it targeted so it only affects specific cells. It can reduce loss in travel, which is known as systematic release, and also has a higher bioavailability, meaning more of it is taken up by the target cell. Because of this targeted approach, it often isn't as toxic and has less side effects, and due to the control we have, it tends to be more effective, meaning it has higher therapeutic efficacy. We can then use further polymers such as pluronic F17 to help stabilize it, reducing other side effects. There's the potential to use block polymers to reduce drug resistance. But why can it do all this, you may ask? Well, it comes back to the micelle structure we saw earlier. Its amphipathic nature means that medicine can be put on the inside, and the micelle will keep it isolated from the outside environment, and in this case, stop it from interacting with the body. When it reaches our target cell, we can then cleave it and release the medicine. This can be done through the use of stimuli. Depending on what monomers are used, we can control which stimuli are effective. Some stimuli we use are cell's pH number, the presence of particular enzymes, temperature, light irradiation, although it can only penetrate so far, ultrasound, and the binding to specific antigen. All these in theory can be used to trigger the cleaving reaction. Now that we've discussed how it interacts once at its target, there's still the problem of reaching it. The immune system is our body's main way of fighting off infection. Once it realises there's a foreign object such as a nanomedicine, it will try to remove this. This can be a problem as it can cause immunosuppression or stimulation, which can cause an inflammatory response or promote autoimmune disease. Nanomedicine can interact with the immune system in several ways, but by adding polyethylene glycol or similar polymers, we can mask the nanomedicine so they don't interact. However, research suggests that there are antibodies being created for these polymers in the body, meaning over time they may become less effective. Now that we have a basic understanding of how nanomedicine works, we can look at what they're being used for. One use can be found in the ocular field. It's believed that at least 2.2 billion people have vision impairment, and this could be attributed to some of the struggles of using medicine in the eye. Medicine tends to have a short half-life, meaning a low retention time in the eye. This means repeated administration is needed. However, this can cause bleeding, infection, and discomfort, and due to the chronic nature of the conditions, will last for a long time. The eye also has some unique physiological barriers, such as the cornea, which can make it hard for medicine to be taken up. Due to their nano size, nanomedicine can bypass many of the ocular barriers with minimal side effects, making it a much more pleasant experience. We see this being used via eye drops. In recent years, we've seen nanotechnology being used for biomarkers, allowing for better imaging of diseases. Nanomedicines are being used more and more for treating different types of cancers due to it being non-invasive. Healthy tissues and cancerous tissue differ in pH, with healthy having 7.4 and cancerous between 6.5 and 7.2 due to aerobic glycolysis and lactate production, allowing for it to be targeted. Cancer cells have only small fenestrations that range between 50 and 100 nanometers, which a lot of nanomedicine is equal or smaller to so can easily fit into. We can further modify our nanomedicine to make them have a higher selectivity by adding disulfide bonds, which are cleaved once they enter the diseased tissue. Although nanomedicine seems pretty amazing, much like with all science there are negatives, it's expensive to develop and takes a long time to test due to the seriousness of nature. All nanomedicine has to go under strict regulations and testing before they can be approved. There's also a worry of misuse. Whenever developing a new part of science, scientists must consider what the negative impact it could have. Dynamite was originally a mining tool, but now used for war. What can nanomedicine do? There are also a lot of areas we still struggle with, and a lack of public understanding. Due to how complicated it is, the average person wouldn't understand, and this could lead to a lack of trust, much like what happened with COVID-19. To conclude, nanomedicine works on an incredibly small scale. They allow for the targeted administration of medicine, and this targeted nature helps it avoid side effects and be more effective. And this is possible due to polymers forming micelles and modifying its characteristics. They are not perfect, and there are plenty of applications.